I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Domann, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset. Jonathan, I want to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome today to Pro Mindset Podcast a gentleman who has spent almost 2 decades in being in the Christian chaplain character world in sports. His name is Jonathan Van Horn. And Jonathan is with Athletes in Action. Jonathan, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you very much. Grateful to be on the show.
Okay, so we have a lot to talk about. I've got some background on you, Jonathan, and you're a former athlete. You've been working with professional athletes, and maybe the biggest impact that you have the opportunity to have is a new project you have going on right now, which is helping athletes make the successful transition to life after sport. And so that's near and dear to my heart because players play in the NFL for a short period of time. Even if they play a decade, it's still a short period of time in the whole spectrum of their life. And they have to reestablish their identity after spending their entire life preparing for playing the sport. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to begin with the end in mind today, and let's start with your platform, your project. Kind of share with our audience your shift movement, framework, and the Tackle What's Next movement or ministry, and kind of share for the audience what those things are about.
Yeah. So I've been working with pro athletes for about a decade now. And like I said, one of the biggest issues is that transition to life after playing professionally. And the mental and the mindset shift that occurs with guys it's so difficult because their lives have been tied up and invested in the sport since they were at a young age. And so as I've been working with guys, I created this framework called SHIFT, and SHIFT is an acronym. And the acronym is just basically the framework for guys to successfully navigate the process of transitioning to life after playing professionally. And what's nice is that it doesn't curtail or hold back people from discovering what their skill sets are and who they are. But what it does is it just enhances it. It brings clarity. And in sport, having clarity and having a game plan, having direction is so important. And the same is true in life. And that's why I came up with SHIFT, is that I work with these pro guys and trying to help them figure out what's next. It just gave a clarity of understanding how they're created, looking at their identity, their value, and their significance. Really began clarity on what they're passionate about and what excites them beyond their sport. It really helped them begin to really look at what is next. Like you said, the career for pro athletes is short. Even successful careers of a decade or longer is still short in the grand scheme of things. So really began to look at what is that next arena, if you will, look like for them, and what could it be? And just begin to think about what the next step could be, and then really begin to put goals in place to be able to shoot after, to strive toward, to really have some direction. And then also just creating some daily habits that they can begin to really intentionally invest in themselves today to prepare for whenever that retirement or, worst case scenario, like getting cut or career-ending injury happens, that they're ready for that moment of transition. That's the SHIFT framework. That's
awesome, Jonathan. Okay, so I'm going to bounce around. Let's go back to when you were playing. What was your mindset about soccer? And you shared with me earlier that you're from great state of Michigan, played high school, sports, late bloomer, and then ended up playing Division III ball at Ohio Wesleyan there north of Columbus, Ohio. What was your mindset all the way through your youth until you got to that point in time where you're playing in college?
Yeah, I was a late bloomer. And so more often than not, I had this idea that I was the underdog. I wasn't the most athletic, wasn't always the fastest, but I knew I had a strong work ethic. And that strong work ethic really got me to where I played athletically. There's guys that had more talent, had more experience, had more resources, but I was able to overcome those obstacles and really beat them and take on positions or starting roles within teams because of my work ethic. And that really is what allowed me to get noticed. I got seen by a scout playing in the state championship my senior year, and he's like, "Hey, man, I want to tell the coaching staff at Ohio Wesleyan about you. And I was like, that sounds great. Long story short, ended up going there, had a great career. Dr. Jay Martin's the head coach there. He's been there for now almost close to 40 years now, and has been just an amazing coach, and really took, for lack of a better word, a diamond in the rough, which is we had raw talent, raw ability, but didn't really have a lot of direction. And so he really began to help hone my skills within the game, understanding the intentionality of film, and really falling in love with the game, and not just playing it, but also studying it and learning it. And he really helped me in that process. And my work ethic was one of the key ingredients to allow me to be successful on the field. And that has significantly transitioned off the field, as well as having the determination, that work ethic to strive and be my best, and to really go after continue growing and developing as an individual and as an athlete.
Well, Jonathan, one of the things that I found that really drives players and performers is having an underdog, hungry mindset, because there's always somebody more talented. I don't know if LeBron and hoops is, there's probably 5 guys in the NBA that are more talented, maybe 20 at the moment because of his age. But you can always find somebody that's more talented. But you can't always control the talent, but you can control the hunger and the drive and the work ethic, right?
That's right, absolutely.
When your career was over, how did you make a successful transition to life after sport?
Yeah, for me, at first it was a little hard, to be honest, because it was this new sense of, I've been giving my life to this sport for so long. And then all of a sudden I remember waking up and going, the reality of I'm never going to put another jersey on. The idea of playing professionally was sort of in the distance, but I was getting married, and I was like, a new job. And I'm like, the financial situation of playing professional soccer in the U.S. at the time, 20 years ago, wasn't really financially viable. And I just was like, you know what? That's not what I want to do. And so I said, okay, what's the next step? What does it look like for me to be successful in transition? So I started looking at exploring options. But I knew the foundation I laid as an athlete. I had seen the success on the field, saw the success in the classroom of having that work ethic. I go, I'm just going to put the same character skills that I had developed and cultivated in sport and transition them to this next step. And so that's what I did. I stuck to what I knew and what I had been successful at the time. And that was, I had a strong work ethic, being determined when obstacles came up, when I was in interviews and doors were shut in my face. I said, hey, that one no was going to be one step closer to my next yes. And so I just kept the dogged determination to find what is that next yes, an opportunity in front of me.
Well, one of the things we talked about before was identity. And I think one of the things that sports is really good at is helping, especially men, develop their identity, because you're seen as a soccer dude. You're seen as one of the basketball players, one of the football guys. That becomes your friend group. It becomes who you are. It becomes your niche on campus. If you are fortunate enough to play in professional sports, when you go out to restaurants, people see you as, hey, you play for the Broncos. You play for such and such team. How did you handle the shift in your identity after sport?
For me, is where my faith really helped significantly in my life. When you step away from the people or maybe the location, the place, and you derive so much of your significance and value from the sport or from that team that you're with, now you're completely removed from that. That's where isolation can kick in. That's where depression, that's where a lot of guys have seen struggle with depression. And for me, it was my faith. Just the reality of having a faith in God and realizing that I was still secure in my faith, that God still loved me, whether I played or I didn't play, whether I had a job or didn't have a job, that I was accepted. And so those key ingredients for me were significant to allow me to make the transition and really having a secure identity and really giving me the freedom to try new things, realizing that whether I failed or I was successful, my faith in God allowed me to be successful and continue to move forward in the midst of that. And that, again, for me was huge. I wasn't worried about or concerned with what other people thought about me, whether I was actually playing or I wasn't playing, or, again, being by myself. Was my faith in Jesus really allowed me to continue to move forward in the midst of that difficulty. And I know not everyone has the faith or maybe believe in God. I get that. But for me specifically, that was significant, allowed me to continue to move forward and really anchor my identity and who I was and my value and significance in something that was consistent.
No, I love that, Jonathan. Let me ask you this. How does that concept of faith and seeing your identity with your creator fold into Athletes in Action and what you guys do?
So Athletes in Action, it's a Christian-based organization, and we work mainly with university and pro athletes all over the world. We're working on a number of top Division I universities. We have chaplain and character coaches working in the NFL with some NBA teams, Major League Baseball, and then we're in over 60 countries around the world. And we're really helping athletes understand, how do you integrate your faith into your competition? What does that look like? More often than not, people compartmentalize things. You have your family and friends, you have your maybe education, your sports, maybe your faith. Athletes actually, we really tried to intentionally, what does it look like to bring God into your competition? What does it look like to bring your faith and really live it out within your sport? Every opportunity that we have in life is an opportunity for worship. And when people think of worship, they think of a lot of different things. But worship is just an opportunity to display honor, gratitude, respect toward someone or something else. And so our actions are an opportunity, our competition is an opportunity to honor God with what He's blessed us with, physical abilities, our talents, life experiences. And when we bring our faith into sport, there's a sense of freedom that you get to be who God has created you to be. And as Athletes in Action, one of the things we're trying to do is helping athletes understand the importance of your identity, your value and significance isn't tied to your performance, because you're fully loved by God. And as a result of that, you can go and perform with freedom and perform at your best. And if you do make mistakes, you learn from them, but you're able to continue to move forward, because your value and your value and significance isn't tied to that failure or that mistake. So you're able to continue to perform at a high level.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned there twice was not tying your worth and your identity to your performance. And I think as an athlete and as a man, sometimes it's important to remember that you're okay and you're loved and you're cool, even though you may not make the most money, you may not score the most points, you may not be the greatest at whatever career you're in. And so it gives you a little bit of a security blanket of knowing that you're not being judged all the time.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really hard, because culturally, whether you're in business or you're in sport or basically education, you're being measured consistently by your sport or by your performance, and even more so now than ever before. So much of our sports are driven by data. So every little thing is being measured now, and every little thing, whether it's positioning, the steps that you take, the number of shots, everything statistically is being measured by data, and then you're being judged by that. You're being judged whether you're successful, you're add value, or value taken away to a team, whether you help a team win or not, your contract size, all of those things. And so we're inundated within a sport culture that says that your value is determined by X, Y, and Z. And when you're able to step out of that, where you're able to step out of where you say, hey, my value is fully secure in God and who He says I am, or who and what that looks like, you're able then to perform at a high level. And you're not concerned or wearing the weight or the burden of feeling like you have to perform, and if you don't, then your value diminishes. And there's this freedom in that. There's a weight that's lifted off when you're able to step into the arena and compete with joy and with the reality that you're not being fully judged because of your performance. You're able to go out there and play with freedom, and that's, I think, there's a joy in that. It's like when you're younger. Remember when you're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, you're going out and playing with your friends. You just play. You just have fun. There's a joy. You want to do well. You want to be successful, but you're just playing with joy. And when you're able to transfer that as a professional or at the university level, your quality of play exponentially increases, because you're not so worried and having that thought in the back of your mind, if I make a mistake, my worth and my value diminishes. There's an emotional weight that's lifted off when you're able to really see your identity and your value through God's eyes.
I think there's a couple of things there, Jonathan. One is that when you tie your performance to statistics or to certain standards, it inevitably creates more stress for the athlete, and its performance goes down every time. And I think that's why sometimes if a player, let's take Tom Brady, who's 43 or something like that, he has the spirit of a rookie. He really does. You can't play into your 40s without having a young man's spirit. And let's go younger than that. Let's say you have a 9-year-old spirit. then you're really playing for the joy of competition and fun, brotherhood, camaraderie, all those things. And that's when you see guys perform at the highest level in the pros, is when they have that spirit of, you called it freedom. It's really, the genesis of it is just enjoying what you do. And so here's the deal. I have a platform as well, and it's the Pro Mindset 7-step process. One of those 7 is passion. If an NFL guy truly loves the game, loves everything about the game, loves the grind, loves the off season, loves the week in preparation before a game, those guys play longer and they play at a higher level. They make more money and they have more successful careers because they truly do enjoy it. And even though once they get to that point, they would never go back to doing it for free, they're playing like they're doing it for free.
Yeah, and there's so much, like I said, there's a sense of joy in that. And I think when joy is a choice. Like I said, and there's guys that have been in the league, it's a grind, they get frustrated, like, this is just my job. But when you compete with joy and you have that freedom, like you said, it's something that I'm going to go out there and just have fun. And there's a smile on your face. And you can see at training and at practices, you can see the guys that are playing with joy and the guys that are not. They're just guys that are out there just having fun. And it's like there's a grind. It's just tough. It's hard. It's a brutal practice. But they're still out there smiling. They're enjoying. You can see there's a little hop in their step that you can just see it in body language and their countenance. And when you have that just elevates your level of play in training as well, in practice as well as in games. Again, you can see it. It's demonstrative through their words and their actions. And then on the flip side, you see the other guys that are carrying the weight, that don't have that freedom, don't have that joy, and it weighs them down and it limits their performance.
No doubt. Okay, Jonathan, you have a role as a chaplain. You have a role as a character coach. Kind of walk the audience through, what are some of the tools that you have in your toolbox that you use to help a team or a group of players develop their character?
A couple of things that I use from a chaplaincy standpoint. We use the Bible as our standard. So reading through the chapters and looking at Jesus and how he lived out his life and the words that he spoke. And so that's from a chaplaincy standpoint, that's sort of the standard, the resource that we use more often than not. And there's so many principles, just life principles, character skills, how to develop characters, things in the Bible that it's packed full. Ideas of love, of hope, of joy, of patience, of sacrifice, teamwork. There's so much that's packed within the Bible itself. So that's the main resource we use from a chaplaincy standpoint each and every week with the guys, whether it's in a smaller group or one-on-one mentoring relationships. In addition to that, some of the tools that I use, I do my own writing sometimes. Some content, that's where Shift came from, was just stuff that I've been cultivating and developing, things I've been thinking about. Something I've been using recently is called Habitudes, using images of habits and attitudes. It's come from growingleaders.com. It's been a great resource, especially with some of the younger athletes within professional soccer. You can get guys that are 15, 16, 17 years old and really building into these young men. Using images and to create and to instill character and leadership principles has been invaluable. One of the things we talked about this last week with I was working with the under-19 team, and we talked about there's a statue in ancient Greece called Opportunity. And the Opportunity statue has a tuft of hair in the front of its face, but it's bald in the back. And the principle is that opportunity is always in front of you, but once opportunity passed, it's gone. And so just talking about the character skill, taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you, take the risk and go for it. Stretch yourself, intentionally grow and develop, seize the moment and don't wait. But because if you wait, once the opportunity passes, you can never get it back. And so that's a resource that I've been using that's been great, a tool I've been using that's been really good this last year or two, especially with the younger guys, just using those images and helping guys understand those character skills and principles, because you can reference them back really quick. So those are a couple, probably the biggest two that I've been using as of late. In addition, from there, I pull a lot from leadership books. John Maxwell, someone that a lot of his content I've been using. I pull a quote here and there, just having guys just talk about and think about and process through. But then, those two are probably the biggest two, the Bible, and then the Habitudes have been the greatest tools I've been using as of late.
Okay, let's go to the Bible. What is one of your favorite stories that is in the Bible that teaches life lessons that athletes can identify with?
Probably one of my greatest biblical heroes is David, and just the tenacity he had. Usually when you hear of David, you hear the David and Goliath story. That's a big one in the Bible. You know, the little dog going after the big dog and just overcoming all that kind of stuff. The thing I love about David's life is actually his relationship with Jonathan, and that's more reason why my name is Jonathan. I'm named after Jonathan in the Bible, and ironically, my middle name is David as well. But I just love the relationship that Jonathan and David had. There was a sense of Jonathan relinquishing his entitlement to the king being being king on the throne, and following in his dad's footsteps, allowing David to step into that. But the sacrifice that they showed each other and the honor and the respect that they showed each other, there was so much packed in that story, and their relationship and their friendship, the willingness to put the other's interests above their own, the willingness to help and encourage each other, to cry with them when they were crying, to mourn when they were mourning, as well as to celebrate with joy with each other. And you saw this friendship really blossom and grow, and I just love that because not only does it depict the love of God, but also gives a real life example of what true friendship, as well as the true team dynamics, can look like in life. Whether it's a team, the willingness to sacrifice for each other, the willingness to put someone else's interests above your own, the willingness to fight for each other, but also fight for a common goal, the willingness to protect when someone else is weaker. That relationship is so dynamic. Again, that's by far one of my favorite stories in the Bible, is that relationship between Jonathan and David.
Okay, let's go to the habitudes. What is one of your favorite stories related to that applies to sports?
Probably one of my favorite is actually, it's called the Iceberg, and like I said, that's been coming around a little bit, a lot over the last probably 4 or 5 years, maybe longer. But the image of the iceberg is that it's what's below the surface that sinks the ship. They did more excavation of the Titanic when it sunk, and they realized that above the water they missed the iceberg. But what actually sunk the Titanic was the iceberg that was below the surface. It was below the water that wasn't actually seen, and that's what actually cut the gouge, the slit in the Titanic, and eventually sunk it. And that idea that more often than not, what holds us back, that limits us and really creates our detriment, is what isn't always seen. It's not our talent, it's not our abilities, it's maybe not where we came from, but it's what's actually on the inside of us. And I love that idea, is because it's like, hey, it's something that you have control over. We all have the opportunity to grow. We all have the opportunity to develop character skills. We all have the opportunity to continue to move forward, regardless of where we're at, regardless of our circumstances. We always have a choice, and that's one of the things that I love, is that idea that what's below the surface that sinks the ship. And so the image of the iceberg, and having guys understand that there is a choice, even in the most dire situations. We always have a choice. So that's probably my favorite.
That's outstanding. Okay, so in working with NFL guys, what is different about that than working with soccer guys, basketball guys? Is there a difference between the athletes and their mindset based upon the sport they play, or is everybody pretty much the same?
I would say for the most part, the athletes that I've worked with have been pretty much the same. There obviously there's some nuances and some things that are a little different here and there. But I think the guys that play at the elite level, you mentioned Tom Brady, like the joy and just that young spirit. Guys that are successful in longevity of athletes, they have to have this mentality of I'm going to continue to grow, I'm going to continue to develop, and I'm going to continue to get better in my craft. And like I said, you see that. I think with every sport there's nuances. You can tell, like a baseball guy versus a soccer guy, or a football, or maybe a pro golfer. You can see the nuances of the sport. But I think athletically, to be successful, there's a lot of similarities across the table for elite pro athletes to be successful at their sport, and see that longevity, but also, again, just finding that success.
Well, I'm going to give you a chance to plug soccer. I coach soccer. I didn't play soccer. Been to a few World Cup matches over the years.
Thanks.
And soccer is so huge all over the globe, and the United States is catching up. Soccer nation in this country is growing faster probably than any other sport. Besides economics, why do you think that the world sees soccer as the number one sport?
The game itself is amazing. Like I said, it was funny growing up. Football, basketball, and baseball were the big three, and it was one of those things where you played those three sports, but then if you were fast, then you also ran track. And then if you were bad at everything, all those, then you played soccer. That just sort of that was just the culture of where I grew up.
That's true.
Yeah, and it was interesting, but I fell in love with the game. And as I began to explore soccer, began to look, and then realize the magnitude and the influence it had around the world. I was amazed. And I remember the first time when I was 18, I traveled to England, and I went to a professional game in England, and the passion and the excitement was unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. I was like, this is unbelievable. And it just, there's a sense of the sport, it just brings people alive. It brings people together. It transcends race, ethnicity, gender. It's something that brings people together. And even with Athletes in Action, I've been able to travel all over the world. And I'm amazed as I travel to various countries, I just need to do is drop a ball down. And as soon as I drop a soccer ball down, whether it's a dirt field or it's turf or grass or whatever, people just come flocking and they'll play. And it's just, there's a common, whether you can speak the same language or not, it's a common bond instantly. And that's one of the things I love about the game itself on a global scale, is that it naturally brings people together regardless of where you're from or who you are or what you look like. And that, again, it's something about it that is a unifying effect that is just, it's amazing.
Well, I can attest to that. When you're in Europe and you go to a World Cup game, soccer guys are just crazy. I mean, they'll go to war with other teams' fans because they're so passionate about their own team. So here's the thing, Jonathan. In Pro Mindset, I'm always looking for different ways to package what it is to have a pro mindset. And a pro mindset is that mindset you have to play at a professional level, regardless of what you do, to be the best in the world at whatever sport you play or whatever you do. In your opinion, on being an athlete, coaching athletes, having a biblical perspective, what is your toolbox or framework for a person to have a pro mindset to maximize their God-given ability?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really, there's just two things. The first one is joy. When we experience joy and make joy a choice, whether you're going into practice or going into games, competition, regardless of what, when we have joy, there's something that, again, that's where that leads us to freedom. And having the freedom, it allows us to compete at a high level. And when you're in the grind and you're pushing yourself, having that joy is so important. And that's, again, for me, from a faith perspective, that joy is found in Jesus. And that's something I work with my guys all the time, is that in the midst of the difficult moments or the crazy, amazing success, intentionally choosing joy in the moment is imperative. And then the second thing is, from a character development standpoint, is how we hone our skills, get better, is that our characters develop most succinctly and effectively when we look outside of ourselves. If we incubate or try to develop our character just intrinsically, there's a shelf life and there's a cap. However, when we're intentionally developing our character with an outward focus, I'm more self-disciplined. I know I'm going to help the sphere of guys around me, the guys that I'm influencing. When we have that intentional focus with an outward focus for our character development, not only do we get better as athletes, but we make everyone else around us better. You know, those are the guys that you want to play with, right? The guys that always make you better are the guys that you want to be around, because not only you're going to develop, but you also develop other people as well. There's a domino effect. And so having that outward focus with character development allows you to not only continue to grow and develop yourself, but also it's going to make everyone else around you better. And to have that pro mindset, that's what you want. Those are the guys that you want in the locker room. Have the guys that have joy and the guys that are outwardly focusing with their character development. So those are the guys that you want to be around personally, and then also those are the people you want in your locker room, guys leading your teams, the guys that are the voice within those spaces as well. And those two things are essential.
Okay, so as a coach, how do you bring those to the locker room? You know, it's called culture. You know, it's like it's the environment that the coach creates for the players to be able to play and practice and prepare and all that stuff. How do you create an environment where there's joy and there's unselfishness?
Yeah, I think first thing is you have to model. You have to display it. Like it's things are the old adage, more things are caught than taught. And so as a coach, you have to display joy. As a coach, you have to be others focused, whether it's with your coaching staff or the players or the support staff or front office personnel. You have to intentionally model that. And then one of the other things that's coming through your communication, the language that you use. So not only your actions, but also your words. And I think it's repetition. I remember an old coach, he'd been coaching for 40, 50 years. And I remember he told me this time we were talking about coaching and the importance of coaching. He said, as a coach, when you think you feel like you've communicated enough, you're only halfway there. I was like, that totally, yes, I resonate with that. Because as a coach, you feel like you're saying the same thing over and over and over again. But the reality is it's not always sticking, or guys aren't always hearing you, or not always catching what's being thrown. So you have to intentionally communicate the language that you're using over and over again. To just you're pushing it to the guys. You want to listen, to understand, to really internalize, to own it. And once they own it, then they can reflect it to other people.
That's excellent. Hey, Jonathan, what did I not ask you that you were hoping or thinking I would ask?
Yeah, I think the thing that I want guys to know is with regards to their performance. When we derive our identity and our value from our performance, you're only as good as your last move. You're only as good as your last contract. And when we derive our identity and our value and statements from those things, it's a struggle. And you can eventually go down a spiral downwardly. And I think that's one of the hardest things for guys, is getting out of that mindset, that mentality of my value and my significance is based on my identity. And I think that's something that I want to help guys not only with as athletes in the midst of as pros, but also as they make the transition to life after playing professionally. Is that who they are, their significance isn't based on their performance. That's so important, so imperative.
That's outstanding. Well, Jonathan, I want to thank you very much for participating today and sharing your thoughts on the right mindset, the right culture, the best way to make a transition to life after your sport, and maybe most importantly, just bringing the Bible into the game and helping people remember that their spiritual walk is a huge part of their identity. It's a huge part of who they are, and it's not mutually exclusive with the sport they play.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of my heart, as well as share and join you today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. 5 stars, of course. You can follow us on our website, promindsetpodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.